this session I'm going to talk about how to get rid of annoying reflections that appear in a window, particularly when you use fill flash in a scene. Now I've got a bedroom shot here which it was important to show the view through the windows because this was for a real estate agent. In an editorial context, sometimes you let the windows blow out to white and you bring the focus of attention back into the room itself. But for real estate photography, I think it's important to show the view through the window, particularly not in this case, but if there was a nice green parkland, for example. So if I get my exposure more or less right for the view through the windows, I'm of course underexposing hugely here and I need some kind of fill to remedy that. And I am a big fan of fill flash to do just that. I've got a unit here to the left of the camera bounced off the wall, and I've got a unit behind me bounced off the ceiling. But I've got a problem. Apart from the fact I've managed to raise these shadows nicely, I've got a reflection, not of the flash itself, but of the wall that it's bounced off. The hot spot on the wall is reflecting in this window. And that would be quite a difficult job to get rid of using the clone tools or other kind of retouching tools. There is an easy way around this. If you select both images by holding down Command and A, you can edit them together as layers in Photoshop. So I'm going to go to Photo and Edit In, and rather than editing in Adobe Photoshop itself, I'm going to go as Open as Layers in Photoshop. And that's going to open the two images in perfect register in Photoshop as one document. So here we are in Photoshop and the two images have been opened as perfectly registered layers in a single document, which will eventually be saved as a Photoshop document. And I've got the flash filled layer on top with the annoying reflection, and below I've got the ambient only layer. If these came out the other way round, I'd be inclined to put the layer that you want to adjust on top. It just makes it easier. And what we're going to do is attach a layer mask to the upper layer and simply remove, by painting with black over the layer mask, the troublesome area. So I'm going to go in the layers palette to the add layer mask icon and click on that, and that's added a layer mask, and we can see that it's selected because of the black bars around it. If you came to this layer and the image content was selected and you then tried to paint with black or grey, then you'd be painting actually on the image itself. So if you just make sure that the layer mask itself is selected and blowing up slightly, theoretically I could just paint there with by selecting the paintbrush and painting with black by selecting black in my colour picker here. But it's a little bit of a tricky edge, that, and I want to make a slightly more precise job of it. So I'm actually going to choose the polygonal lasso tool and set a feather of about 1 pixel and carefully make a few clicks here and just go around the edge of the window pane, just enough to make sure that that area of flare that's been reflected in it is contained. And with that selection made, there's quite a nice shortcut you can do here, which is to hold down Alt on your keyboard and simply hit the backspace key, and that will automatically fill your selection with black. So black has been added to the layer mask, and in so doing it's erased the content of the flared area to show the nice area beneath. You can toggle the effect of the layer mask by holding down the Shift key and clicking on the layer mask, so that's showing the work that we've done. So with that still in place, I'm just going to press Command and D to get rid of my selection, pan out a little bit, and I hope that shows just how quickly a problem like a reflection of a flash can be sorted out. The only thing you might do now is to flatten the image. You'll see that the file size, because there are two layers here, is quite large. It's 120 megabytes. I should have said that I actually edit in Photoshop in 8-bit for standard real estate photography. I don't believe in using 16-bit because that would make the file really massive, and that simply clogs up your hard drive with data. For really critical work, you might work in 16-bit if you really wanted to preserve colour integrity. You were supplying this for magazine use, for example. But for this kind of work, 8-bit I find is plenty. but I could actually, just by flattening the image, reduce the size even further. And Command and S on your keyboard to save. And the exciting thing happens back in Lightroom, because the file that you've been working on is automatically re-imported into Lightroom. This is such a useful tool, because it means that you really don't have to disrupt your workflow by having to go back and find the file and pull it back into the group of images that are applicable to the job. The image we're after is this PSD document here, which has the remedied window. Either side of it we've got the raw material, which was the ambient only exposure and the flash fill exposure. And what I like to do, this is going to be the subject of another video, I have a system of color coding which I think helps with workflow. You'll see that my raw material are coded with a red label down here in the thumbnail bar. And once I've got an image that might be a fusion of two of those raw images, I actually give that a green color coding, which helps me identify the images that are to be supplied to the client. It means that I don't mistake the one that's got the reflection in the window and send that off to them. Not the first time that's happened in the past, I may say. So here's our processed image. I hope that's a useful trick. It hasn't added a huge amount of data to our hard drive because we flattened it, we've done it in 8-bit, and I think it's a pretty nice solution. We didn't have to do a lot of HDR blending. I was able to use my flash without worrying too much about what was going to happen with the windows. The time spent shooting there was no more than about 5 minutes, and the time in post probably 5 or 6 minutes. I hope that's been helpful. I'll see you in the next session.